In this video, we will be talking about media and politics. What is the relationship between these two institutional mechanisms of any democratic system? In modern circumstances, whenever we are trying to examine factors that influence people's psychological orientation to politics, must take account of the crucial role played by the media. To say it differently, that whenever we are trying to examine the factors, we must take account of the crucial role played by media. It's beyond doubt that media have been recognized as politically significant since the advent of mass literacy and the popular press in the 19th century. However, it is widely accepted that through a combination of social and technological changes, the media have become increasingly powerful political actors, and in some respects, more deeply enmeshed in the political process. At least two developments are particularly noteworthy. And the first is the impact of the so-called primary agents of political socialization, such as the family and social class, has declined. So there is a decline of these primary agents of political socialization. Whereas once people acquired a framework of political sympathies and learnings, that adult experience tended to modify or deepen, but seldom radically transformed. Now, this has been weakened in modern society by greater social and geographical mobility and by the spread of individualist and consumerist values. This, in turn, widens the scope for the media's political influence, as they are the principal mechanism through which information about issues and policies is presented to the public. Now, the second thing is the development of mass television audience from the 1950s onwards, and more recently, the proliferation of channels and media outputs associated with digital media, which is very important. So, all this has massively increased the media's penetration on people's everyday lives. Digital media, here we mean to say, is a generic term for the many different forms of electronic communication, which is made possible through digital or computer technology. Now, it has been estimated that half the world's population had gained access to the internet by 2018. And these trends, moreover, are most pronounced in the developing world, where in the case of the internet, access doubled between 2010 and 17. This means that the public now relies on the media more heavily than ever before. Nevertheless, the relationship between the media and politics continues to be surrounded by debate and disagreement. These debates focus on the nature of the political biases that operate within the traditional or mass media, and the extent to which the way that political processes have come to be shaped or framed by the media has changed due to the shift in usage from traditional media to digital media, and especially social media. Social media include the forms of electronic communication that facilitate social interaction and the formation of online communities through the exchange of user-generated content. Few commentators doubt the media's ability to shape political attitudes and values, or at least to structure political and electoral choice by influencing public perceptions about the nature and importance of issues and problems thereby. However, there is considerable debate about the political significance of this influence. A series of rival theories offer contrasting views of the media's political impact. And some of these theories, which are most important for us, include the pluralist model, the dominant ideology model, the elite values model, and the market model. So, to begin with the pluralist model, a pluralism highlights diversity and multiplicity. Generally, we know it. The pluralist model of the mass media portrays the media as an ideological marketplace in which a wide range of political views are debated and discussed. While not rejecting the idea that the media can affect political views and sympathies, this nevertheless suggests that their impact is essentially neutral, in that they tend to reflect the balance of forces within society at large. The pluralist view, nevertheless, portrays the media in strongly positive terms. In ensuring an informed citizenry, the mass media both enhance the quality of democracy and guarantees that government power is checked. So this watchdog role played by media was classically demonstrated in 1974. For example, in Washington Post investigation into the Watergate scandal, which led to the resignation of Richard Nixon as U.S. president. Uh, so, as some people argue that the advent of the digital media, and particularly the internet, has strengthened pluralism and political competition by giving protest groups, including anti capitalist activists, a relatively cheap and highly effective means of disseminating information and organizing campaigns. However, the pluralist model suffers from some significant deficiencies. And what are these? We can take, for example, to discuss this weakness is that weak and unorganized groups are excluded from access to mainstream publishing and broadcasting, which means that the media's ideological marketplace tends to be relatively narrow and generally pro-establishment in characters. This is one of the deficiencies of pluralist model. Secondly, the dominant ideology model portrays the mass media as a politically conservative force. So, apart from this um, plural model, we will be talking about dominant ideology. But before that, let's take one more instance of deficiency. Private ownership and formal independence from government may not be sufficient, to argue in that direction. That whenever there is a private ownership and formal independence from government, this may not be sufficient to guarantee the media's oppositional character in the light of the increasingly symbolic relationship between government and journalists and broadcasters. Apart from this pluralist model, we have dominant ideology model, which portrays the mass media as a politically conservative force that is aligned to the interests of economic and social elites and serves to promote compliance or political passivity amongst the masses. We have a Marxist person, and in this Marxist version, rooted in the larger Marxist critique of political culture and particularly the ideas of Gramsci, this view suggests that the media propagate bourgeoisie ideas and maintain capitalist and hegemony, acting in the interest of major corporations. Why this happens? Because according to them, ownership ultimately determines the political and other views that the mass media disseminate. And ownership is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a small number of global media conglomerates. So, for example, the largest these conglomerates, some of the largest conglomerates include Facebook, Google, Comcast, New Corporation, Wacom, Disney, CBS, so on. What does this dominant ideology model tells apart from this Marxian understanding of media and politics? So, from dominant ideology model perspective, the media play an important role in promoting globalization in that their tendency to spread ideas, images, and values that are compatible with Western consumerism helps to open up new markets and extend business penetration worldwide. One of the most influential and sophisticated versions of the dominant ideology model was developed by Noam Chomsky. It's a familiar face, and Ed Hammond in Manufacturing Consent. It's a very popular work. Noam Chomsky and Ed Hammond in Manufacturing Consent. The model is called the propaganda model. Chomsky and Edelman and identify five filters through which news and political coverage are distorted by the structure of media itself. What are these filters? Uh, One of these filters is the business interests of owner companies, sensitivity to the views and concerns of advertisers and sponsors. The Apart from these things, we have the sourcing of news and information from agents of power, such as governments and business backed think tanks, or pressure applied to journalists, including threats of legal action. And then an unquestioning belief in the benefit of market competition and consumer capitalism. So, this analysis by Chomsky emphasizes the degree to which the mass media can subvert democracy, helping, for example, to mobilize popular support in the USA for imperialist foreign policy goals. However, the dominant ideology model is also subjected to criticism. Objections to it include that it underestimates the extent to which the press and broadcasters, particularly public service broadcasters, pay attention to progressive social, racial, and developmental issues. Moreover, the assumption that media output shapes political attitudes is determinist and neglects the role played by people's own value in filtering and possibly resisting medium messages. Now, apart from this model, we have elite values model. Okay, what this model has to tell us. The elite values model shift our attention away from the ownership of media corporations to the mechanism through which media output is controlled. This view suggests that editors, journalists, and broadcasters enjoy significant professional independence, and that even the most interventionist of media moguls are able only to set a broad political agenda, but not to control day to day editorial decision making. The media's political bias therefore reflects the values of groups that are disproportionately represented among its senior professionals. However, there are a number of versions of this model depending on the characteristics that are considered to be politically significant. So, one of the elite values model holds that the anti socialist and politically conservative views of most mainstream newspapers, magazines, television stations derive from the fact that their senior professionals are well paid and generally from middle class backgrounds. A quite different version is sometimes advanced by conservatives, who believe that the media reflect the views of university-educated liberal intellectuals whose values and concerns are quite different from those of the mass of the population. We have a feminist version also. In feminist version, this model highlights the predominance of males among senior journalists and broadcasters, implying that this both explains the inadequate attention given to women's views and issues by the mass media and accounts for the confrontational style of interviewing and political discussion sometimes adopted by broadcasters and journalists. Although the elite values model helps to explain why the range of political views expressed by the mass media is often more restricted than pluralists suggest, it also has its limitations. So, what are these limitations? Chief amongst these limitations is that it fails to take full enough account of the pressures that bear upon senior media professionals. These, for example, include the views and interests of owners and commercial considerations, notably ratings figures. Now, apart from these, we have market model. The market model of the mass media differs from the other models in that it dispenses with the idea of media bias. It holds that newspapers and television reflect rather than shape the views of the general public. This occurs because, regardless of the personal views of media owners and senior professionals, private media outlets are first and foremost business concerned um, with profit maximization and thus with extending market share. The media therefore give people what they want and cannot afford to alienate existing or potential viewers or readers by presenting political viewpoints with which they may disagree. So, such considerations may be less pressing in relation to public service broadcasters such as the BBC, which are more insulated from commercial and advertiser pressures, but even here, the tyranny of ratings is increasingly evident. Nevertheless, although this model dispenses with the idea that at least the privately owned mass media should be seen as part of the political process, it helps to explain some significant trends in political life. And one of these may be growing political dissentiment, with politics resulting from the trivialization of political coverage. Fearful of losing market share, television companies in particular have reduced their coverage of serious political debate and thus abandoned their responsibility for educating and informing citizens in favor of entertainment. And that is one of the major weaknesses. So, this was a general discussion on media and politics, and in that process, we discussed a few models. I will be talking about media and politics more, especially its influence in other videos.